Our keynote today is an exemplary community college leader. I am really honored that we have Dr. Karen Stout, who's the president and CEO of Achieving the Dream, coming to join us today. Dr. Stout has long been in the community college space, and her leadership has been recognized in many capacities. She began her career, I believe, at Harvard Community College. She is a native Marylander, which brings her a little bit near and dear to our hearts. And she served in many different areas and different capacities, which gives her a breadth of experience, and served for, I think it was 14 years at Montgomery County Community College in Pennsylvania as the president and doing the Achieving the Dream work there. Achieving the Dream has been with us for quite some time, and us coming in 2019, I think, gives us an advantage because we can be the beneficiaries of the things that people have done before. And right now, Achieving the Dream is poised, as we are poised, to really meet the challenges of what's ahead. When Dr. Stout became the CEO of Achieving the Dream 5 years ago, things shifted. The conversation shifted. And the necessity to reframe our work from just accelerating through developmental education to really serving the honest and true needs of our learners became really crystal clear. Dr. Stout is an extraordinary leader with extraordinary vision who really understands what we do on the ground. And it's my honor to welcome Dr. Karen Stout to the podium at the College of Southern Maryland.
So it's just great to be here. I want to congratulate all of the award winners. When I was looking at the categories and the projects that you were working on over the last year, it reminded me of the importance of the small details. And a story that I would share with my colleagues at Montgomery County Community College about brown M&Ms. And the importance of attending to the brown M&Ms. The story goes back to, and you may know this story, Van Halen, who when he would perform, would put into a very lengthy contract a requirement embedded on like page 30 in small print that in the back of the stage in the green room, that the bowl that held his preferred M&Ms would be absent brown M&Ms. And so when he came to the venue and would go backstage, he would check the bowl. And if the bowl was absent of the brown M&Ms, he would not do a sound check. But if it included brown M&Ms, he went through the meticulous checklist protocol of making sure that everything was set up. So it's just about the importance of those small things. And our students depend on our attention to those small details. It is great to be back in Maryland. Of course, ATD is headquartered in Silver Spring, Maryland. I started my community college career, as Dr. Murphy mentioned, at Harvard Community College. The last time I was on this campus was in the mid-1980s, when I worked at Harvard Community College and I was chairing the state's affinity group for marketing and communication professionals. So it's been a long time. And I'm still in my mind, I keep going back to Charles County Community College. And I have to keep saying College of Southern Maryland, College of Southern Maryland. It's an interesting story how I started my career in community colleges. I've been in this work now for 35 years. I'm deeply committed to our mission. Community colleges have been central to my life, my family's life. But it's all been an accident, in a way, as to how I ended up being in the place I'm standing today. And thinking about the students that are coming to us in a couple of weeks and asking them to pick majors when we know our own paths are filled with these accidents. And I'll talk about this today. I applied to Harvard Community College as an admissions advisor, which meant that I was visiting high schools and doing transcript evaluations. That was the job I was first hired into my community college career. However, Harvard rejected my application for employment 3 times. 3 times. My mom, I graduated from University of Delaware. She wanted me to come, back to Bel Air, which is where I grew up. And she clipped a classified ad. I applied. I was rejected. Got the letter. Couple of months later, the ad showed up again. This shows you how old I am. Ad showed up again. She clipped it. She mailed it. She said, please try to apply again. Obviously, they can't find who they want. I applied again. I was rejected again. Third time was not through that process. It was the hiring manager from HR from Harvard who called me on a Thursday evening and said, "We know we've rejected you twice. But we hope you will consider visiting with the search committee tomorrow morning." And that was the best yes I ever made. I went that next morning. I met with the search committee. I was immediately forwarded to the dean of the college and left that Friday afternoon with a job offer at Harvard Community College. And I've never left this really important work. There are several ATD colleges in Maryland. Community College of Baltimore County, which won our Leah Meyer Austin Award in 2015. Montgomery College, Harvard, Baltimore City Community College, who has their convocation started yesterday, goes into today, and ATD is right in the center of some of their transformation work, their absolutely essential transformation work. Prince George's Community College, which is one of our leader colleges. Anne Arundel, another one of our leader colleges. And it's just so exciting to welcome College of Southern Maryland into our network. Every one of the Maryland colleges has a unique context, and their work around student success is different based on their context, based on their students, based on their community needs. And that's what's amazing about the work of Achieving the Dream. There's a framework that I'll talk about, but there's also this energy and space for you to take on the work and shape it the way that you want it. Now, what's interesting about the Maryland community colleges is that there's a common context in Maryland that is interesting for me to come back into and think about. And that is that this is a relatively strong state for community colleges. You may not see that if you've been in Maryland and in Maryland community colleges most of your career, but as I've been able to move back and look at what's happening across the entire country, I see a stable state, local, and funding environment, a strong transfer environment, a policy environment that's generally enabling your work at the local level. And those are attributes that are so important to this student success work. Convocations are really important times. And this is, I think, my 35th one. So I'm glad that you've allowed me to keep my streak alive, Dr. Murphy. There's a comfort to the rhythm and tradition and this unique chance that we have as educators to have a second new year. That's what I think about as today being a second New Year's Day. There's a contagious energy and hope as we welcome new students and new faculty and staff to our campuses. And it reminds me a little bit of the feeling one gets right before a new baseball season. Now, I am a big baseball fan. The one that's explored by Doris Kearns Goodwin in her classic memoir, Wait Till Next Year. Or if you're an Orioles fan, and I am one. I wanted to follow Brooks Robinson at third base when I was a little girl, and I thought I would until I was about 12 years old, and my father told me girls wouldn't be able to play Major League Baseball. But anyway, I am an Orioles fan. So then the name of the book might be Wait Till Next Decade. Of course, we've been waiting a long time since winning the World Series last in 1983. So I'm excited to be here. I hope that I offer some context that sets you on the right path as you begin your Achieving the Dream work. And I really hope that this is not a set of remarks that is like an inoculation. You know, and I think about the way we sometimes do new student orientations on our campuses, where we bring them in, we do this, we throw all kinds of concepts at them, and then we expect that they're going to retain all of that and actually use it to support their way in navigating what is a very difficult pathway. So I hope, rather, that I give you kind of a launch for what will be a sustainable pathway of work. So the title of my remarks, No Bird Soars in a Calm, is inspired by David McCullough's book called The Wright Brothers. And the book offers some terrific analogies for what you are about to embark on in this work with Achieving the Dream. In his quest for flight, Wilbur Wright meticulously journaled and observed birds flying. He watched them for hours and hours and hours, and he recorded thousands and thousands of pages. And that observation work was the baseline for building the prototype for the flying machine. Makes me think, how often do we actually watch our students come onto our campus and navigate through our systems and processes with intention, in a mindful way? There's a question mark. We're going to talk about a lot of data today, but you can never underestimate the importance of qualitative data and observation. And I think, you know, Wilbur Wright catches that in this quote, which is, "The complexity of the flying problem makes it difficult. It's not to be solved by stumbling upon a secret, but by the patient accumulation of information. And this is why we think a quick solution is impossible. Our work around student success is complex. There is no A to B strategy that I'm going to be able to offer you today. I wish I could. I can't guarantee that you'll see immediate results from being in ATD from this fall to next fall. But I can share with you today some terrific successes by ATD colleges. And sometimes it has taken 5 to 6 to 7 years for those colleges to lay the fundamentals in place in order to begin to see the rapid advancement of their student success outcomes. So it's kind of a warning. This is not easy. This is what David Epstein in his book Range calls a wicked challenge. It's not a kind challenge. There's not a technical solution. It's an adaptive problem, which requires adaptive solutions and requires organizational range versus a number of vertical specialized silos that result in small interventions that, when they come together, don't result in scaled results. You say that about your work in your application to ATD. You say you do really, really great work around pilots, but that you struggle with pulling that work together into something that's sustained and scaled and touches all students. What's really good is that you're joining Achieving the Dream, a national network now that is in 44 states, more than 270 colleges. And ATD was formed in 2004. I was an early ATD college president. Montgomery joined ATD in 2006. And we were still in ATD in 2015 when I left to take on this role as the president of ATD. And I can remember my faculty at Montgomery saying, "This is a fad," or "You're asking me to take rigor out of my classes," or "You're asking me to look at data about the way students move from my course into the next course. I'm just worried about my course." You know, all of the kind of pushback about a concept that was around helping more students enter and succeed on our campuses. And now, 15 years later, this work is not a fad. It's a cause. It's a movement. It's an imperative. And it's not just work that's happening at America's community colleges. It started at America's community colleges, but now the conversation is across all sectors of higher education. This summer, I was at Harvard working with the Graduate School of Education faculty with 11 teams of university leaders from all types of universities, private selective to more open access universities, who are looking at their student data and saying, we can do better. We need to do better. Our country needs us to do better. And that institute was a lot like the institute you attended in June with ATD, when you really joined a group of colleges that are committed to this goal, helping all students, particularly the most underserved, realize substantial value from their post-secondary experience and their earned credentials, thereby strengthening their communities. There's a lot to unpack in this statement. And I know you will be later this afternoon or later this morning looking at defining what student success means for you. This is kind of the statement ATD has put out that we hope our colleges will grab onto and customize to guide you forward in your work. But what's important here is that this movement has moved beyond completion. This is not just about taking on developmental education outcomes, which is the way that it started. That was the wrong question about why students were, we hypothesized students couldn't succeed because developmental education wasn't set up right. And we worked for 10 years to try to organize developmental education, and we missed the bigger picture. So this is beyond just the associate degree. This moves us into looking at credentials that have value. So workforce credentials, associate degrees that go to baccalaureate degrees and baccalaureate degree completion. Labor market value of those degrees. Are students able to get wage gain? Is there economic and social mobility built in to the way programs are designed? And in that statement is a commitment to equity, equitable student outcomes. Some of us have these equity t-shirts on. I know that if you have one on, can you stand? Who's out in the audience with one of the equity so you are members of the, I guess the team that came to the kickoff in June. And thank you. And I wore mine. This is not my typical convocation garb, but I wanted to fit in. And this is really an important statement. And there's a history behind this statement. So the message on the t-shirts comes right out of ATD's equity statement. And the message on the t-shirt is, equity refers to ensuring that each student, there's my team. Boy, if I didn't show this, and I'm glad it's being taped because there's evidence, my administrative assistant or my executive assistant, who is the fourth one in from the left, would be very, very angry with me. She designed the t-shirt. She's very proud of the t-shirt, so let's give her a round of applause. So Kelly, I hope you're watching this or that you will watch this on videotape. But the statement, this is what's on the t-shirt. And this is important. It's part of a larger narrative we have for our ATD equity statement. And we stumbled as ATD on this issue of equity. Not we didn't stumble, it's been part of our core founding. When we were founded in 2004, we were founded specifically to help low-income students and students of color primarily move through associate degree programs, period. And many of our colleges started to look at their data and designed a lot of boutique programs that were not helping the students that they were intending to help. In fact, when we looked at the data over 10 years, we realized that the interventions were actually increasing the completion equity gap rather than shrinking the equity gap. So we stepped back as an organization and said we need to think more strategically and intentionally about what we mean by equity. The narrative in our equity statement that precedes this statement is really important. Let me read it to you. Student access and success in higher education continues to be impacted by the effects of structural racism and systemic poverty. Achievement gaps, and inside ATD, we've actually started to refer to achievement gaps as opportunity gaps. Achievement gaps among student groups reflect structural inequities that are often the result of historic and systemic social injustices. Now, that explicit expectation that our colleges will take on the equity work that's in the last part of this statement about dismantling barriers is what makes ATD colleges unique. So by joining our network, you are making this commitment. And I think that piece of the commitment is what really resonated with the team from College of Southern Maryland that was with us in June for our kickoff work. Many of our colleges use our equity statement to kick off their work. Most are adopting pieces of it and customizing their statements to their local contexts. But we do highly encourage our colleges to come into this work with the philosophy about what it means to have equitable student outcomes at College of Southern Maryland. Dr. Murphy mentioned that our students come to us with dreams. I want to share a couple of dreams with you. Oh, I missed one of those slides. Okay. This is Janae. She was on the slide. Just imagine Janae. Her story might resonate with you. You have met Janae. Janae could be a College of Southern Maryland student. I want to read a passage from her recent testimony before the Senate Help Committee. I'm 29 years old. I'm one of the 50% of college students around the country who is financially independent from their parents. I'm a parent like nearly 1 in 4 college students. I'm also a single parent, like 14% of college students. 11 years ago, I graduated from Reynoldsburg High School and went off to college. I showed up at the University of Toledo, the child of a single mother who never graduated from college, without any money, not even enough to buy a comforter for my bed. The university cost over $25,000, and I received a Pell Grant of about $4,300. I borrowed more than $20,000 in federal and private loans to afford my first year. I tried everything to avoid that debt. I worked at the campus Starbucks, the campus grill, at the Target, and I was exhausted. I could not focus on school. 2 years after I started, I dropped out. Time passed, I got married, gave birth to my daughter, got divorced. By 2013, I was living in a little apartment and working full-time, and I decided I needed to try college again, and this time at Columbus State Community College. I became one of the 27,000 students enrolled there and started again to juggle my responsibilities. I worked a full-time job, attended college, raised my daughter, cared for my mom, who was also ill. When my mom passed away, I was left to take care of my 2 teenage brothers in addition to my daughter. And although I loved school, I was juggling many responsibilities and decided to take a break. Once again, it seemed like a college degree was not in the cards. Now, fast forward to my 3rd try 4 years later. I re-enrolled at Columbus State Community College, this time enrolled part-time so that I could successfully work multiple jobs. And though it's a slower road to my degree, I'm making progress. Now, Janae has now finished her degree at Columbus State and has transferred on to a four-year university. But her story, those of you on the front lines, in fact, you all know this story. You all know this story. One thing she says in her testimony is, I remember thinking that these problems were my fault. Am I just not cut out for college? Have I done something wrong? And another story, this one from a student at Northern Virginia Community College who now has graduated from George Mason University and is a program coordinator at George Mason. His path was not easy. He had a 1.6 grade point average. When he graduated from college, he enrolled at the community college right after high school, Nova. He says it was overwhelming, it was scary, it was frightening. I didn't know the terminology, the ropes. I knew, though, that my mom wanted me to go to college. He goes on to describe an experience that nearly derailed him early in his time. I remember, and he says this, his name's Ariel. I remember the moment I realized how unprepared my background had left me for college. During my freshman year, a professor asked me to stay after class. Once the room emptied, he handed me an essay. Red marks all over it. And at the top was written, if you ever do this again, I will dock your grade. So in the conversation with the faculty member, Ariel says, I had no idea what he was talking about until I looked at the paper and saw the words double space underlined multiple times. I had turned in a 10-page single-spaced essay instead of a 10-page double-spaced essay. He thought I was trying to show off. The truth was that before coming to college, I didn't have regular access to a computer, so I had no idea that double space even existed. I also didn't think to ask anyone. At the time, the only person in my family who had a college degree was my older sister. Of course, I didn't tell the professor any of that. I just assured him it would never happen again. He continued and persevered. Those stories remind me of the work of Raj Shetty. And does anybody know who Raj Shetty is? So Harvard, well, now he's at Harvard. He was a Stanford economist. Now he's at Harvard. He founded what's called the Opportunity Insights Institute. I encourage you to put that on your list of things to look at after this conversation today. He's well known for releasing all kinds of colorful maps that show the chances for mobility for students, citizens, depending on where you're born. So there's a map that's on his website, and this is just a screenshot of it, that shows the chances of economic mobility based on household income. But basically, where you're born has a lot to do with whether you can move out of your current life situation. What strikes me here, and red is the places that do not have high levels of economic mobility. So what strikes me here in this map of the southeast of the United States is where Maryland is and the color of the area where you're located. And Dr. Murphy mentioned you aspire to be an engine for social and economic mobility. There are lots of opportunities for you to make a difference with that as your North Star. What's really important here is that Shetty posits that opportunity or mobility does not correlate with any traditional economic measures like employment or wage gain. Instead, his research is showing that opportunities cause, and this is important, is connected to social capital, a term that refers broadly to the set of connections that ease a person's way through the world, providing support, inspiration, and opening doors. So in some areas of this map, even in the red areas, especially in the red areas, there is the presence of opportunity, but also the presence of the opposite, which are the swift currents that can drag a person down. Those are the places where there are few narrow paths to success, and as Shetty says, 99 ways to falter. And so if you go back to Janae's story and Ariel's story, they both bring to life that they were able to negotiate those narrow paths. Those are paths that have little to do with academic preparation and everything to do with the social capital that was wrapped around both Janae and Ariel to help them be successful. We often in the student success conversation don't speak to that. We speak to the technical parts of the way we organize programs and redesign advising, all of those things which are very important, and I'll talk about those, but we give short shrift to this issue about social capital and the importance of things like empathy and wise feedback. Think about Ariel's story. Wise feedback, affirmation, and all the research is pointing to this, importance of student-faculty interaction. So we all can be part of a social capital network. That is not hard to do. That means showing up and caring. And I know and I can feel that this college community is committed to that call. So this is a quote from the Community College Research Center, and I think it captures our unique mission and the complexity of it. We are called upon to do very difficult work in an ecosystem that is not really supporting the call for this difficult work. There are a lot of external and social political, a lot of noise around us that makes this work very difficult. And then there's the data, the big data that begins to give this, and I'm going to go out and then come back into your data. So I'm going to go out a little bit, come back into College of Southern Maryland. So we have tremendous challenges before us in terms of inequity along the lines of income and race in our country. Here are findings from a recent study by Georgetown University's Center on Education and the Workforce. And the disparities here in educational attainment are clear, and they appear in our students' lives well before they reach College of Southern Maryland. High socioeconomic status students with below median math scores still have higher educational attainment in both the 2-year and 4-year settings compared to low income students with above median math scores. Less than 1 in 10 low-income students coming to us completes an associate's degree if their math scores upon admission are below the national median. The gaps are also unmistakable when you disaggregate national statistics by race and ethnicity. Same research center, Georgetown Center on Education and the Workforce. Gaps in educational attainment are most apparent for African American, Hispanic, and Latinx students, and especially those with below median math scores. You can see the correlation and the importance of math. And thinking differently about what we mean by competency in math. It's not necessarily that every one of our students needs to complete college-level algebra. And many of our colleges have redesigned math pathways. And you're probably very familiar with that work, and probably some of that's underway here. Meanwhile, public funding for higher education in just about every state is at pre-recession levels. Now that's pre-2008 levels. We've not recovered as a sector from the recession 10 years ago. And as I look forward, my biggest worry is that another recession could just really destabilize our work as community colleges. But one primary driver of the last recession was the increase in tuition rates that hit community college students the hardest. And this data from the National Post-Secondary Student Aid Study shows that community colleges have the largest enrollment growth in the number of low-income students enrolling out of any institutional type in the higher education sector. Does any of this surprise you? Some of it? It all wraps up into what is expected of America's community colleges. That we will rebuild local communities, we'll continue to do more with less, we'll help to rebuild the middle class, we'll help the nation recapture our lead in global education. The challenges are daunting. We are looked at to revive the American dream. And though we are rarely in the national headlines, we are overwhelmingly respected. Why? Because of our localness. Our local communities value us. All the data. There's a lot of skepticism about higher education right now. But when you disaggregate that data and you go down and you look at the community colleges, there's not a lot of skepticism about community colleges. There's a lot of value for community colleges. And it's bipartisan value. James Fallows, in a recent piece in The Atlantic, and it's based on his book, Our Towns, where he travels to like 10 different towns and he looks at the characteristics, the fabric of the town and what makes the town or city go. He finds two organizations that make a town or city go. It's common across his observations. Libraries and community colleges. He says that a reliable sign of civic progress is whether a community takes its community college seriously. He understands clearly the ripple effect of our work, that our missions are transformative. So he says this: just about every world historical trend is pushing the United States toward a less equal, more polarized existence. Labor replacing technology, globalized trade, self-segregated residential housing patterns, the American practice of unequal district-based funding for public schools. Community colleges are the main exception, potentially offering a connection to high-wage technical jobs for people who might otherwise be left with no job or one at minimum wage. And he goes on to say, not every community can have a research university, but any ambitious community can have a community college. And even today, there are new community colleges being formed in communities across the country. I think your president put it succinctly in her recent message to you about this work when she said, College of Southern Maryland is a solution. And Fallows affirms that when he says the people working hardest towards solutions, at least among those I've met, are disproportionately at community colleges. Do you feel that? I felt it with the awards, that you're working tirelessly on solutions for your students. And yet, even with all of that work here and across the country, we're still not meeting our goals around student success, particularly for low-income students and students of color. Data from the National Student Clearinghouse show that fewer than 4 in 10 students who start in our institutions earn a credential within 6 years. I think if I know your data a little bit, you'll welcome students this fall, and 50% of them will not return next fall. So you can see how that number of 4 in 10 is possible. Completion rates for students of color still lag, even with all of our work with equity, behind white counterparts by 10% or more, and only 15% of students who transfer earn a bachelor's degree within 6 years. You know, across the country, 80% of the students who enter our community colleges this fall aspire to get a bachelor's degree. If we don't do something to change their trajectory 6 years from now, only 15% of them will have that bachelor's degree. It's a lot of dreams deferred, which makes, in my mind, this work very urgent. And the students who fare worse in those transfer metrics are those who accumulate credits at community colleges and then transfer without earning any credential from their community college or their transfer institution. So they have a bunch of college credits with no credential. And yet, in some of our success measures, we track them as successes because they transferred out of our institutions. So we have a lot of work to do, and just around that, a lot of the success frameworks, the voluntary framework for accountability that we've worked in partnership with AACC on developing, and the Maryland PAR framework, sometimes leave behind students who are our most vulnerable in the way we count success or the way we look at success. PAR, for example, leaves behind any student who doesn't complete, I think, 18 credits. Think about those students that aren't being counted in the PAR framework. So now let's look at local context. So I went into Opportunity Insight, and I just drilled in to, and you can do this, to the area around this campus. And you know, this is what the income distribution of the area looks like. So the red areas being the lowest up to the darkest blue being the highest. This probably isn't a surprise. You can do all kinds of things with this tool, so I just played with incarceration rate. Because I do think that when we begin to think about measuring our work and strengthening our communities, there is a link between educational attainment and, you know, incarceration rates. So the blue is the, you know, least amount of incarceration, red, orange, the most. College graduation rate. Now you can go in and play with a lot of variables here, but what I guess I'm encouraging you by showing these, first of all, to help you see that there's this tool out there, but also to make sure that you're looking at your community as well as your own data as you start this work. Understanding your community. Now, there's other data to keep in mind. 35% of Southern Marylanders, and this is right from your own reports, are poor, working poor, as measured by the United Way's ALICE report. You know that some sort of post-secondary training is required for a family wage, yet 30% of the adult population in the region has no college degree. There are a lot of good paying jobs in Southern Maryland that are going unfilled. And that 80% of your graduates remain in Southern Maryland. You make this economy go. You make these communities go. And yet half of the students who start this fall will have dropped out by next fall, unless something changes with their student experience in the fall semester and the spring semester. So this all looks daunting, I know. And I'm purposely trying to, I guess, create a sense of urgency for the work. You know, as I travel across the country, I see two ways that our colleges move into this work. One way is through a call to action that's caused by some type of external force that requires the college to absolutely change and abandon previous practices. It can be a budget crisis. it can be a piece of legislation like in Florida that totally eliminated developmental education. But something like external that forces this focus. Or it can be something internal. It can be understanding your students and understanding the opportunity and understanding the calling and having a thirst for continuous improvement of what you're doing. And I think that's the place that College of Southern Maryland is in. That second kind of calling. So with all of that, it's tempting to jump in. It's tempting to take action. It's tempting to act on hunches or assumptions based on this data, because the work is that important. But as Hal Gregerson says in a book that I love, it's just out, it's called Questions Are the Answer. He says this: the most difficult and important job is never to find the right answers, it's to find the right question. For there are few things as useless, if not dangerous, as the right answer to the wrong question. And your decision to kick off your first year at ATD as one of discovery and learning is critical to your future success. And I might say a model that I want to share with other colleges in our network, because you are focusing intentionally on two questions. Who are your students, and what does it mean for them to be successful? Even with this urgency, I believe you are appropriately pausing and, borrowing from Hemingway, giving questions the clean and well-lighted place they need to unfold in. And these questions, I know, will lead to a question burst of other questions. Two questions that will create many, many more questions. There's only one way to see things until someone shows you how to look at them with different eyes. That's what questions do. And the way that the model here is framed, those questions offer an opportunity for every one of you to be engaged in this conversation. Your ATD team is asking you to ask questions. They're asking you to bring your intellectual curiosity to the table, to engage. It's not, to me, it's a very welcoming way to begin the work. You're in a collective quest. So back to Wilbur Wright, whose curiosity about birds and the way they fly gave him different eyes to look at the flying machine. Your ATD work is going to help you to do that through this year of discovery. There are two questions. Those two questions will lead to other calls to wonder questions. And I looked at your data, and here are a few of my questions. This is my question burst when I started to look at your data. Your Pell rate is 27%, yet there seems to be deeper poverty in this community. Is there a disconnect? Are the most vulnerable citizens in your community not attending College of Southern Maryland? Why are they not attending? You see, this is the way that question burst starts to go. Why are 14% of your first time ever in college students earning 0 credits in the first year? These are students that are full-time enrolled. 14% of them are earning 0 credits in the first year. How is that possible? What's that student story look like? What's the grade? Like, are there withdrawals? Are there Fs? I mean, what is the student story behind that? And why do they tend to be more Black, male, and Hispanic? Why are Pell Grant recipients not earning 12 credits in the first year at the same rate as non-Pell recipients? Why do 20% of white students complete in 3 years versus 11% of Black students? Now think about the stories of Ariel and Janae as you start to probe these answers and develop more questions. Because I think you will be challenging your assumptions and some mental models. Social capital, remember, social capital is essential. Answering the questions will require you to collect a lot of data, but I urge you to think about the data that are missing. What data are missing? We often only look at the data that the IR office puts in front of us. But what's missing? Lessons from the Challenger launch, where the decision to go was made based on a review of the launches that went versus a review of some of the launches that were held back. A World War II problem on fortifying fighter planes, where the decision was made to fortify fighter planes based on looking where bullet holes were in different parts of the fuselage of planes that had come back. What was missing? The planes that didn't come back. So it was a wrong answer, wrong question. So there's data that's missing here. And how do you get that? I call it that passive data. That's the student story. That's your adjunct faculty story. That could be a staff story. There are a lot of stories that aren't being captured, passive data that you need to understand. You begin this work resting on 15 years of lessons from achieving the dream. So these were early lessons, and they're important. The first being that interventions that are connected and not connected and scaled are not yielding strong results. You said you pilot things well. We struggle with bringing things to scale. How many different student success interventions do you have here at College of Southern Maryland? Do you know? Are they inventoried anywhere? Do you know how many students they're touching? Do you know if they're working? Are they different across the campuses? If a student comes from one campus to the other, will they be able to have access to the same level of support and intervention? I mean, there's all types of questions there, but we've learned that this work cannot be siloed. There is a new generation of developmental education reform. We started this work looking at DevEd, accelerating DevEd. Now we're in what I call the 3.0 version of DevEd. There is a good document that's available on the web called Core Principles for Redesigning Remedial Education from a Student Success Lens. It's about 3 years old, but it gives 6 principles around the redesign of developmental education. That document is still relevant in some states that have not eliminated developmental education legislatively. And I don't believe Maryland has not done that, but so there's more work. But the key being, developmental education is not a standalone area of our college. It has to be integrated with our programs. The third, entry to transition systems must be redesigned, and I'll show you a slide on that. The student experience is all over the place and fragmented. Bringing that together is important. Equity-minded design, we learned that later about the importance of thinking about equity from the beginning. This is more than disaggregating your data. It's about taking action around the disaggregated data. Leadership matters. The best ATD colleges doing the best work have boards of trustees who are standing strong with their colleges in this work. They understand that it takes time and that the data at first might fluctuate. Learning, sometimes you go back when you're learning instead of going forward, and it takes a little bit of time for habits and discipline to take root before you begin to see the trajectory of change move. And then the last point here, I think, connects very much to your work. This ATD work is not another thing for you. It pulls together your strategic plan. It pulls together the 3 components of your strategic plan. It will help you make more progress. 2015, observations now, 15 years, well, 2019, but based on from 15 to 19, some observations we're seeing about successful colleges. They have strong fundamentals. I'll speak to the fundamentals in a second. And they make a commitment to building the fundamentals, and they know that that commitment is enduring. They adopt an organizing framework for the work based on their culture, not based on something ATD tells you to do, or not based on reading, pulling the guided pathways framework and literally interpreting it on your campus here, but customizing the framework, advancing your own unique theory of change. What's going to help move the needle here at College of Southern Maryland? I'll bring these to life with some examples in a second. And then moving with patience and a sense of urgency. So the fundamentals. These are the 7 fundamentals that we believe at ATD are essential to building a student success culture. And we have a framework, and you'll be digging into this framework in the early part of this first year, or the mid part of this first year. And hopefully the entire college community will be engaged in an assessment where you can see where you stand in your strength in these capacity areas. So there are different dimensions to each capacity area and questions related to each capacity area. And just a quick glance, based on 220 colleges that have used this framework and answered the survey questions, we've been able to kind of say where we need as ATD to deploy the most support for our colleges. Our colleges are struggling with the data and technology capacity. Is that familiar? Lots of information, lots and lots of information, but really not a lot of insight for action. How do we pull that all together? Equity. Equity work is difficult. It's hard to have this conversation that's on this t-shirt. I love that I am able to stand here today and wear this t-shirt. I couldn't do this at every one of our ATD colleges right now. And we're struggling with this conversation nationally. And there's certain organizational capacities that are required to have the conversation and to begin to put a lot of our strategies in action. And then teaching and learning. We have left faculty behind in this work. We've designed around the edges with student affairs work, with systems work, and we've been reluctant to work inside the classroom. And we can't leave the faculty behind anymore in this movement. The faculty, in fact, have to lead it. That's the next generation of the work for ATD. You heard Ariel's story in the classroom. Faculty are our scalers. You touch every single student that will come through these doors in the next couple of weeks. As a collective, you have the most ability to make a difference. We need to get the resources to the faculty to help you to be able to do that. That's the next I think horizon for a lot of this work. But let me go to the next thing on a successful college: adopting a framework that rests on the fundamentals. So this is the guided pathways framework sitting around the fundamentals. Strongest colleges are using some type of framework to organize their work. Guided pathways is one. Lost momentum framework is another. I'm coaching at Montgomery College. They have adopted their own customized framework. In your first year of discovery, you probably will come up with a framework that will fit your context. You'll be able to take this and design something that everybody at College of Southern Maryland understands and can contribute to. Another one of the models is holistic student support. And I just want to show this because this is a typical student experience. Right? And then multiply it by how many campuses? And then draw how they work across the campuses. This could be a really interesting map if you took the time to really draw it for College of Southern Maryland. You know what, faculty and staff, new staff, for those of you being onboarded, probably have the same experience with the way that you interact with the college. The supports aren't pulled together for you either. So if you think about your own personal experience. So there's a holistic student support framework that's built on the fundamentals too, that helps colleges to design more bundled supports for students. And you'll see these are two different students with two different sets of bundled supports. But colleges are able to pull these together in a scaled way so that students can easily navigate and access the supports they need. So frameworks are important. The next are levers. So I'm going to go through a couple of cases of colleges. Amarillo College joined our network in 2011. They've moved their completion rate overall from 13% to 21%. For Black students, from 4% to 20%. Hispanic students, 15 to 22. And first-gen students, 12 to 21. That's their first-gen and low income, so other student populations that they've identified as being important for their mission achievement. How'd they do this? They started with their data, and you can see that their trajectory from 11, 12, 13 is just modest. But then between 14 and 15, you see the spike. So you kind of see the flywheel start to turn. They had their data, they started to ask their questions, they started to move forward, they tested some things, and then they really realized our lever is around creating the holistic supports that our students need. So they went into, their president adopted something he called a no excuses campaign, and this college works really, really hard to make sure students don't have excuses for dropping out, that the college doesn't have excuses for students not succeeding, all across the board, and they really put a lot of energy into developing more holistic student supports for their students. Their big question was not about how to improve completion rates. It really is about how do we eradicate poverty in our service area. So they took this on as a poverty project. Columbus State went from 8% to 21% increase in three-year graduation rate. Now, look at their line. It didn't start to move. In fact, it went down 8, 7. They joined in 2007. They're a long-time ATD college. So it shows you how long this work can take. But between 11 and 12, and then 13 to 14, something started to happen. And it was that the president really set out this vision for whole college change and connections with the K through 12 community, deep, deep connections with K through 12, and deep connections with the employer community. And that started to turn the flywheel for Columbus. 8 of the 10 Aspen Prize winners are ATD colleges. That's not a coincidence. And a couple of stories here. Pierce College in Washington State has moved their completion rate and eliminated equity gaps. And they've moved it from 18% when they joined Achieving the Dream to 38%. And their goal now is 50%. And their big move, their big lever, and this is one that won't work in every culture, they decided to share course-level student success data with everyone on campus. So everyone had access to every course-level student success data. And it caused chaos. But they had strong capacity to work through the chaos. And they've used that data and that culture of inquiry to really, as their lever. This takes a lot of time. This is from CCRC and Community College Research Center, and it really shows, each year. This is around building a framework for guided pathways, but the same thing is around any institutional transformation. It takes about year 5, we're finding, for colleges to begin to really see the scaled results. So it's hard to stay in the work. Get frustrated. That's why boards are important. That's why sustainability at college presidents is important. It's why faculty leadership is important. It's why administrative leadership is important, staff leadership. Sustaining this work requires a culture of deep, deep commitment. So I love this from Jim Collins, I know Good to Great, but he has a new monograph out about what it means to turn the flywheel. And he talks about the way to get things moving is to build an architecture that then can begin to turn the flywheel so you begin to reach a tipping point of progress. And that's what we see our ATD colleges doing now. Final additional thoughts, throwing a lot at you. The fundamentals are enduring and cyclical. Your work will never be done in building the 7 capacities. While it is important to take this on as a whole college, it's also important to think about what would this look like if we engaged the community and we thought about College of Southern Maryland being in the center of this work and building partnerships, like the spine for helping the entire region raise educational attainment rates and improve economic mobility. What would that look like? Can we be that influential in our community? Targeted and universal support. So I talked a lot about breaking down structural barriers around equity. Those have to be combined, and I call those universal approaches. Those have to be combined also with targeted approaches. It is an and, not an or, around the equity work. And then I also, I think, hit on the emergence of teaching and learning as a key lever. This is what I see as the evolving, kind of framework for our work. Many of our colleges are in phase 1, really working to improve student completion. I think College of Southern Maryland is probably in the late stages of that phase 1. You have a lot of good work. You've already moved forward. And as you move into this work, we'll be asking you to take a look at things like, what are the student economic gains from attending a community college? And how can we measure those? And then finally, what does it mean for the community and the community's well-being that College of Southern Maryland exists? Now, if you think about what would this community look like without College of Southern Maryland? Think about how many of your graduates you come into contact with every day. They're making this community go. Imagine if you weren't here. And now imagine if you were able to really have more graduates in the community. And you were able to think about measuring how you're contributing to the well-being of the community. I'm sorry about the quality of this photo, but this is Amit. He was a Dream Scholar for ATD last year. And one of the things that you can do as part of the network is nominate students to come to Dream and be a Dream Scholar and represent College of Southern Maryland. But I like to go back to students and the student stories and how those stories illustrate truly that no bird soars in a calm. No, not one of our students soars in a calm either. And here's Amit's story in his words. There are no cardinal directions to tell where I am from. I am from everywhere. I am from Sudan, Chad, France, the United States, and a little city called Utica, New York. I am from Mohawk Valley Community College, where champions like me attend. I am from English and Braille. And Mazalit. Mazalit is my native language. It's not written or read, especially in Braille. I am making history at this moment when I say Talam. This translates to education in English. It's historical because it's the first time a Mazalit word has ever been written, read, and recorded in Braille. In this moment, I am from pride. I am from farm animal smells, rice and spice, unbearable temperatures in a Chad refugee camp. I am from procrastination, disorganization, an open mind, open heart, and open eyes. I am from war, but I am also from love. I am from dreaming big and learning that humans can evolve from their failures. I am from education is the key that unlocks the door to success and the understanding that humans make mistakes. I was once the little boy that was told he could never receive an education because he was blind. I am from closed school doors, bullies hitting and running, inaccessibility, and that overwhelming feeling of being lost. I am from Chad, where I had to memorize everything because there was no way for a blind person to read or write. I am from the United States, where now I can read, speak, and write in English. I am from Mohawk Valley Community College, where I participate in campus activities. I am a member of the Student Leadership Academy, the Lambda Beta chapter of the National Honor Society. I am active in local and state government and interested and connected at the local courthouse. I am a person who has evolved from life's lessons, injustice and inequality. I am the person who once had no sense of direction, but now I know where I'm going and what I want to be. I am from getting into law school and helping others with my knowledge, and I am from studying public policy. I am from believing that one must take actions if they want to see change. I am the person who does not need cardinal directions to get me there. As the cartographer of my own life, I am guided by the fact that no obstacle is too big to overcome. So may College of Southern Maryland go forward in this important work, guided by the fact that no obstacle is too big for you to overcome, and that no bird, no student, no college in this work soars in a calm. Thank you.